Michael Sean Comerford. Welcome to the ROI Online Podcast.
Thank you so much.
So I ran across you. You have this very interesting book, American Oz, but you're an immersion journalist, and you've had some experiences in your lifetime that are very interesting. I've It seems like you've been a writer, and you're a former award-winning journalist in Chicago, New York, Budapest, Moscow. You've biked across America several times. You've hitchhiked across America, Europe, the Middle East, North Africa. You've ridden freight trains. You've studied Buddhism in the Himalayas. I thought this was kind of interesting how I don't know what goes through someone's mind to go, I think I'm going to go to Ireland and win a boxing championship. But you travel the world, you live in Chicago, you got this book, American Oz. And so I wanted to explore and learn about that.
All right. It's an Amazon #1 bestseller. It's self-published, and there definitely is a story behind this story. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let's what comes across someone where you decide, you know what, I'm going to start traveling and writing. What's going on in your life at this time that you just pack up and become nomadic?
Well, I was 30 some years a journalist, and the journalism business, especially in my field, which was newspapers, was drying up. And so I thought, well, let's go write books. And I had long thought about this, these traveling carnivals, because I thought these people were traveling secrets. I thought that there were great stories to be told on the road. And I thought, well, go tell their stories and then look at America. I originally thought I'll be in one carnival all year, and I'll be in the Silicon Valley. I'll cover the Silicon Chasm, which is the difference between the richest people in America, which is the Silicon Valley, and their high number of homeless. And I thought, this is income inequality. So it's, I know I can do this, I'll bet this is going to be a very compelling story. And it didn't end up anything like that.
Yeah. Oftentimes people start businesses, and the people that listen to this podcast, they're small business owners, they're marketing directors, they're folks that really, they're interested in interesting stories, but they're looking for relationships in these disconnected domains that help them gain insights that improve the way they approach the world and what they do. And so I think often that we start off on this journey and we think we're going to start a business and we're going to do this type of service or this type of product, but later on we find that it's really evolved or changed. Tell us a little bit about that in your experience.
So I went to, so there's a story side, and then there's the business side. And the story side I'll give first, which is I went to work for a professional wrestler who fought on the same bill with Hulk Hogan at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. And he said, well, come on out here. We all have blogs out here. You guys from Chicago, you think that's unique? Come on out here, blog if you like, but I need some workers here on my carnival. And I went out there, and he goes, well, I didn't quite realize that you were a real writer, man, and you're fired. And you have a stupid idea. Your stupid idea is you're going to work for a carnival, but no carnival owner is going to have a writer on their staff. He says, I worked for Vince McMahon. He says he had writers, but he owned them, and they wrote what he wanted. And if I can't control you, all my risk is downside. And so you're fired. And plus it's stupid because in some of the big carnivals, half the staff is Mexican. You don't speak Spanish. You're not going to get to know half the staff, and you'll be fired the second that you won't be hired. And so I looked at him and I realized that he was giving me a gift, which was, I'm not going to stay at one carnival. I'm going to work in 10 carnivals. I aimed at 12, but I worked in 10 carnivals in 10 states. And then I went down to Mexico to get the Mexican side. And I spoke to the ones who spoke English. And so the whole thing evolved from there. And so it started one way, and it ended up completely different. And I ended up working in California, New York, New Jersey, Chicago, Alaska, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. And in Florida, I was in a freak show, but they didn't let me on stage because they didn't see the inner freak in me. And by the way, the name of the book, we haven't gotten around to that yet. And I hope that people see this and they get a lot of tips about what my experience was in marketing, but I would be remiss if I didn't market my book during this interview.
Absolutely.
And it's called American Oz. And I partly named it that because it's pulling back the curtain on a whole different side of the world and kind of an alternate reality that's traveling from town to town. And it's subtitled An Astonishing Year Inside Traveling Carnivals at State Fairs and Festivals, Hitchhiking from California to New York, Alaska to Mexico. And the reason for the hitchhiking was I had to live on carnival wages and I wasn't going to go coast to coast flying. So I just stuck out my thumb. And so there's hitchhiking stories and carnival stories and a lot of themes about immigration and the working class, the working poor, the American caste system, family separation. And it's a tremendous book. Can be, as I said to you in the pre-interview, that it can be read on both levels on it. A very great journey story, a road story on the road, and but it also can be read from an issues point of view. So one of the reviewers today said you fleshed out the humanity of these people, and that's what I wanted to do. So that is the book side that ended up completely different.
Well, let's talk about that. Before you began this, what was your impression? What do you think our general impression is of the carny life?
Well, I think, and I know, because I tried to get artists to do a cover. And here's my cover. It's quite brilliant.
Yeah.
And but all of them came up with pictures of carnival people in them, and they were homeless, smoking, alcoholic old men. And that's not what they are. There were that, but their families, their mothers, their fathers, their kids. So these people grow up in carnivals. There are generations of them, and they spend their whole year on them. And they're veterans of wars. One woman I knew there was a Iraq War bomb specialist. So she went up and deactivated bombs in Iraq, and I met artists and all sorts of incredibly interesting people. So I wanted to blow apart the stereotype of these criminals that might be hiding out, that may be dangerous people, maybe drug addicted, but really what they are the working poor, and they are looking for love and meaning in their lives, as we all are. And that's the main point. And that I got around to, by the way. I didn't go out to tell that story. I thought it was income inequality, but it became about equality of the human experience.
So let's talk about your transformation. Obviously, in a story like this, we experience a transformation. Tell us a little bit about how you were before and how you were after.
Well, I went in as a professional. I think I wanted to be an immersion journalist that goes in and reports on everybody else and what they say and what they do and so forth. And at one point in Santa Monica, it was my first state in California. I told the boss that I was leaving, and he told the whole crew at our church meeting on a Sunday, and he says, everyone, cowboy, and that's because this is the hat I wore on the trip. And he says, cowboy is leaving us, and we're all going to miss him. And And then all of a sudden, the Mexicans started throwing their hats in the air and yelling out, "Pug Mahone," which is Irish for "kiss my kiss my butt." And I taught them that on St. Patrick's Day, and and they were yelling that, and then the American carnies were cheering also, and all of a sudden it was a real pep rally.
Uh-huh.
And so I realized at that second that I had been really wrong all along, that I wasn't really a journalist here. I was part of the story. And so
Wow.
whatever I feel, if I feel discriminated against, or if I feel lonely or separated from my daughter, who at the time was 7 years old, or if I feel underpaid, underappreciated, overworked, that's how they feel. And so I became part of the story, and that enabled the book to have an arc, which was I gradually became more and more of a carnival person by the end. And I saw what I hadn't seen at the beginning, which was their humanity. And I came up with all those ideas about how we are all more alike than we know. We're all connected in more ways than we know.
Yeah.
And
So when
Carnival people are worthy of our attention. Their stories matter because they are us, and we are all living in stories, and theirs moves. All these ideas came to me at the end because I was learning.
So you have this experience in Santa Monica, and you hitchhiked to the next location.
Yeah,
It probably was
New
going through
Jersey.
your mind. Was this a one-off, and then you experienced this camaraderie again?
Yeah, when I left New Jersey and New York, I did so because my it's a part of the story. My daughter turned 8, and her grandmother said, "Well, she's missing you, Mike." And I go, "Well, I'm going to hitchhike back to Chicago and be there for her birthday." And she's right here in the room, actually.
Yeah.
And she. So I told them I'm leaving, and there again, they all were stunned. And because here's another thing that you wouldn't know, is that if you are leaving a carnival, you are making, let's say 40 to, you're working at least 60 hours a week. But sometimes if you're living in the carnival, you're never off.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're making less than minimum wage. You would say, well, what kind of a job is that? And who would want a job like that? I mean, you're
Right.
making almost nothing. And yet, when you leave a carnival, every single time, all 10 carnivals I left
Mm-hmm.
said, "I am sorry you're going back to a sucker job. I'm
Wow.
sorry you had to do this. This is really terrible. I
So
really
they
feel bad." Everyone in Chicago, it was heart-wrenching. I mean, the boss was angry at me. He goes, "Man, you were family." And he goes, "How could you do this?" And they're shocked. And I'm going, "Well, you don't pay us, you
right.
overwork us, but it's a lifestyle, and they believe it's show business, it's addicting, and they believe they're living the best life."
So they see themselves in a way as separate from the traditional lifestyle that most of us
They're
are.
living on, yeah. I mean, the one reviewer, and I'm learning a lot about the book from reviewers,
Mm-hmm.
American Oz, everybody, is that they're living on the edge of the American dream. And they're living on the edges of society. They're coming to your town for 3 days. They're setting up rides. They're setting up fantasies all over the place. That's
Mm-hmm.
not really, that roller coaster really isn't going to kill you, but you're going to feel like it. This isn't really a scary house, but it's going to feel scary. And then they're going to spend all night long, because that's what a tear down is. It's also actually got a name, a slough. And they'll work all night long to tear that thing down. And in the morning, it disappears from the mall lot, and from the open lot down the street, or from the state fair. And the state fair, that's an overnight teardown.
Mm-hmm.
And you just disappear. And so they're in the middle of your community. They're part of your community. Every year they come back to the same place, but they're not part of your community.
Mm-hmm.
They're on the edges. And
so help us understand what their perspective of all these people that parade through for those 3 days when they come in. what's their perspective of the unenlightened part of the world if they see themselves separate, or like when they're disappointed you're leaving, they're disappointed because they thought you were becoming a part of this enlightened community that had bonded and had
Yeah.
um, these better relationships, I guess, right?
Their family. And, but also, they're, I'm overgeneralizing,
Yeah.
but I would say one of the compelling things I found too was motivation. We were trying to get inside people's heads. This isn't journalism anymore. This is something else.
Hmm.
And I'm not listening just to what they say. And person after person, especially ride jockeys, which are people who run rides, they were saying, I do this for the kids. And one woman said, I didn't have children. I do this for kids all the time. And she goes, if they don't win my game, I pay for it out of my own pocket. And I go, you can afford that, goldfish lady. That was her nickname. You can't afford that. You can't afford gas till the next, this is spring. You can't afford gas to the next place barely. And she goes, but I do it for my babies. I do it for them. And I go, wow. And I heard that from, stereotypical old carnies who said, yeah, it's all about the kids. And so there was a huge motivation about the kids. But then there were those jointies who ran the games who thought, well, these guys are marks and
Hmm.
I need to make a living. And so some of those guys were borderline pirates.
Hmm.
I I have a passage in one of the books where I was actually in San Mateo, where a homeless man came on. He was citing the Bible about Jesus who came to the temple and banished all the merchants from the
Yeah, the
temple.
money changers. Yeah.
And he said that we were the merchants and that was the temple. And I was going, holy crap, is he going to come back with a whip like Jesus did and whip us all? And then I thought to myself, well, don't whip me. I'm just a ride jockey.
Yeah.
Whip the jointies. They're the thieves. And but even them even they are very aware that their job is giving joy to others. And P.T. Barnum put it nicely, and he didn't make it up. But it's in my book too. But the noblest art is the art of bringing joy to other people's lives,
Mm.
and they do that. And as I said also earlier, is that during this time of COVID, when we're all being separated, and we're going into winter now, and it's going to be even worse. The mental health crisis is being aggravated. Suicides are going up. Mental illness is being aggravated. Calls to helplines are going way up. And these are the people that help with that. Communal joy is part of what is part of our release and our feeling of belonging. And they bring that, and they should be considered essential workers. And instead of being looked down on, there should be in the future, when you make a carny joke, and I know you don't make any carny jokes, but when you're making a carny analogy, they won't make any sense. And I want to bring up this really quickly, is that recently Joe Biden made a lot of news in the carnival community because he compared to Trump. Now, Obama has compared Trump to a barker, carnival barker, but he compared Trump to a carnival worker using a shell game. It comes every year.
Mm.
And all over the trade publications, carnival people were writing in online saying how angry they were about the analogy, because he didn't say Mexican carny worker, because if he did, he'd be canceled, because everyone would go, hey, you're anti-Mexican.
Right.
And he didn't say a crooked guy comes to town. He said carnival worker. And we look, I hope after reading my book that you would say there should be a day when that kind of analogy would make no sense. You would say, wait, it would be the same as saying, hey, a crooked priest came to town with a shell game, no. And so I don't know if that'll ever happen, but I do shoot down these stereotypes, and I saw the value and the beauty in what they do, and their motivations in a lot of cases were terrific. But like I say, the jointees did call you all marks, and me, I'm a mark now. And and if you were with it, which is a phrase, if you were with it, which is means that you travel with the carnival, you were one kind of person, and if you weren't, uh, you're potentially dangerous to them, because there's a history in carnivals of townies attacking carnival people,
Hmm.
and religious carnies thought that they were full of sin and black arts and things like that. So that's a whole history of that, and so
Why do you, so in the movies, this topic, the carnival topic, is often in movies, and it's very interesting and it makes for a great story, right? But yet society includes it. It's a part of our lives as
no,
Americans, and even in Europe and other places. Why is it that this is needed? Why is this a part of our lives? What's going on in our stories?
uh, well, I'm not sure with that, but I will say that uh, there is a thing called the Dark Carnival, and that's a kind of a theme. And Stephen King has explored it.
Hmm.
And that's the Something Wicked This Way Comes is a
Hmm.
classic by Ray Bradbury. And it's about magic, murder, uh, juggalos, and the Insane Clown Posse have a Dark Carnival origin story.
Hmm.
And so uh, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, carnivals they are calculated to be chaotic and to steer you in certain ways, and chaos is scary, and so you can get overwhelmed. They're supposed to overwhelm the senses,
Hmm.
and uh, and so uh, you know I have no problem with people feeling that enjoying good stories about dark carnivals. But one of the things is I've recently been approached to help write about. There's a new movie with Tom Hanks coming out about uh, Colonel Parker, who started out in carnivals, and and Elvis plays a carnival worker in several of his movies.
Hmm.
I think in part because of Colonel Parker thought they were interesting. But so carnival workers weren't always looked down on this badly, but you know, um, they are American, by the way. You mentioned Europe.
Hmm.
In 1893, there was a World's Fair in Chicago. It was the biggest in history, and it was amazing. They call it the A book, a recent book was a few years ago, was written about it. The Devil in the White City. It was a white city in the middle of a kind of a polluted Chicago after the Chicago fire, and they had a midway and the first Ferris wheel, and they had sideshows up and down the midway, and uh, that and lighting was just coming around, electric lighting, outdoor electric lighting. And so technology was booming. There was a pandemic, by the way, the 1893 pandemic. In a lot of ways, a lot like these times where we have booming technology and a pandemic and an economic crisis. All that was happening at that time. And some wildcat entrepreneur said, we can put together a traveling show that combines the best ideas of 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, and let's go town to town. And so traveling carnivals are an American institution. They have them in Europe to some extent, but they came from here. They have traveling shows are one thing, but this was a combining of traveling shows with lighting, with travel, with sideshows, with rides, and the big thing being rides. And circuses had animals, and so there you
So,
go. And like I say, I think we can come back. The carnival people can come back, but I hope they do. And I hope this pandemic reaffirms this in people's minds, that these people are here to help you have fun, and you need them, like you need a positive experience in your life.
well, I've worked at some county fairs, and
Ah,
I've you really see like families, they really do look forward to these events. They will come and spend their whole week's
oh,
paycheck
yeah.
with their kids. I mean, even the parents get into it as much as the kids, and it is fascinating to observe. But it's like it's such a stressful environment with all the noises and things that are vying for your attention, how how does how does it become such a family atmosphere that you can thrive or bond in such a stressful environment that's always in chaos and moving. You're never anchored.
I don't know that. I mean, I know the kids love it. They love the chaos of it. I mean, they run from ride to ride. I ran the carousel for a while, and if you open those gates up, they would run like greyhounds from the gate to the carousel. And I go, well, what is it about the carousel? It moves really slowly, but they pretend the animals they pretend the horses are real animals, and they just love it. And then they go for the sugary candies that are all horrible for you, and the adults going for the deep fried foods and it's full of it is overwhelming to some people, and to others it is a break from the boredom of life. This is excitement. Most of life is boring, and it's pretty much going to end the way you think it's going to end. But something new and something surprising might be around the corner. So, and I think that is part of the allure of it, is that you get out of the normal life of doldrums and whatever your problems are, and you escape into a fantasy world. And for a while, you're inside of a dream, like Oz, in American Oz.
So other than the camaraderie and the family aspect of a group of people that work together in such a trying lifestyle, and yet they bond and they grow from that. What was another shocking revelation for you that you didn't expect?
Well, what happened to me was, it turns out that I was a pretty good carny. I had a routine at every place. In some cases, I would have the largest lines. So I would turn my ride from the second or third largest grossing ride into the best. So I was a good carny, and I was the top earner at the State Fair of Texas for my my joint.
What year?
This year was 2013 to 14. That's another thing we're going to get to. It was a hard book to sell to anybody, and I eventually ended up self-publishing. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to engage in a self-publishing business, highly speculative at this point. We're at the beginning of my journey, and it's not a success story yet. The first book is a success, but
why was
we're going to have to come.
Why was your ride the most popular? What were you doing?
Well, in let's say in California, I had a lolly ride where I would get out there. If you hit the button, it was a swing ride. So the ride would go up in the air and then start turning around, and the swings would fly out in wide circles. And but if you hit the button, it took like 5 seconds for the machine to turn on, and then 5 seconds for the machine to go up in the air, and then 5 seconds for it to go swinging around. So I would hit that thing and go out among the people, and I would say, okay, everybody, I say up, up, up. And all of a sudden they would all be going up, and it would look like I am ordering the machine to go up. And I'm clearly the only person there. And then I would say, and away with you. And then we'd go in wide circles and circles, and the kids would start screaming, and kids would come back again and again and say, how did you do that, mister? How would you do that? And then parents would come over and they would say, you got to get a load of this guy. He is going nuts. And so I had a show where I was so energetic. And the carnies, and I got the idea afterwards, because one of the carnies said, Mike, I've been in carny since I was 11 years old, or I wanted to be a carny when I was 11. I ran away at 14. And he says, I've been a carny that long, and I've never seen anyone with that kind of energy. And I go, well, that's what I'm going to be. I mean, at every carnival I go to, I'm going to be more energetic than anybody, and I'm going to have a show like no one's else's show. I'm in show business. And that's what I did. And at the Texas State Fair, there's these all pirate carnival workers that were with me. I mean, one of them even talked like this, and he says, "You're never going to get this. You're an idiot." And I go, "All right." So I stood there right next to him, and we were throwing, you have to throw these 16-inch softballs into like laundry basket tubs. And if the softball stays in the tub, you win. And if it doesn't, you don't. And so literally, without any forethought, the first person that came up, I said, I said, "I am going to hypnotize you." And she goes, "What? You're going to hypnotize me?" I said, "Absolutely. And I'm going to hypnotize you with Mike's Rainbow." She goes, "With Mike's Rainbow? What's that?" And then I go, "Well, you throw that ball in an arc, like a rainbow arc, and I'll show you how to get it in, and you'll learn because you're hypnotized." And then I hypnotized her, and she kind of learned it. And then, of course, she lost. But she thought she was going to win, and she walked away thinking I was hypnotized for a while. And all of a sudden, people were coming over for Mike's Rainbow and to be hypnotized and so forth. So I had a variety of ways of making myself a character.
So here you are, you're this unique character. You write this book, but in the traditional world of publishing, you're rejected over and over again. So
Yes.
what about you took this and persevered regardless?
Well, a sense of shame on one level, because I didn't want to spend a full year doing something and nothing comes out of it. Another aspect of it was that I kept a blog, and it was an exciting blog. It was very well followed because you didn't know if I was going to live or die week to week, because I was hitchhiking, and I went down to Mexico, into the Veracruz province, which is there into the state. And that's the most dangerous state of all in Mexico for journalists. They kill the most journalists. And so you don't know whether I'm going to live or die. And you're following my blog, and it got very popular. I did not tell anybody I was a journalist. That's how, the first Carnival owner told me, showed me how the whole thing should go. I didn't tell anybody I was writing about them or videotaping them. And so they had pictures and videotapes on the blogs, and I wrote magazine articles too. And I got reviews from the Chicago Tribune calling it erudite. And I go, "Oh, don't call it erudite. No one's going to read erudite." But enlightening and so forth, and exciting. And so I go, "Look, I know I came back, my sister said, 'Mike, I did not want to read this. I thought you were insane to do this.' But I started reading it, and it was all in the writing. I love it. I can't get over it. I'm obsessed with it. It's terrific." And I go, "Well, if it's all in the writing, then the concept isn't going to be the one that sells it. The actual product is going to be the one that sells it." And I got an agent. I tried to sell it out east, and some people wanted the carnival aspect, but no hitchhiking and no journey part. And I said, "No, you got to have both." And they said, "Well, then we're taking a pass," and I did the marketing. Eventually, I did the marketing on this research, and they were right. Nobody wants to read about hitchhiking. It's a horrible topic. And Carnival's unproven also. There are carnival books that have done well in the past, but a long time ago. And I guess you can consider On the Road by Jack Kerouac, a book that did well, and it had hitchhiking, but that also is from the 40s or 50s. And so yeah, it wasn't an obvious seller, and I just I knew that the writing had gotten people on board. I knew that the magazines had gotten people on board. I knew I had built a platform, and I knew that I could write this book so that people would read it. And I kept getting rejected. I rewrote it every time. It was almost every time, not every time it was rejected. Okay. But I can tell you, I rewrote it more than 24 times, and finally, it got better and better and better. There were several books that might have been very good in the past too, completely different almost, but and so I finally figured out how to self-publish, and if you self-publish, you can get 70 to 80% of your revenues. If you go through a traditional publisher, you will get 8 to at the most 15%, but usually right around 10% of all your revenues and net revenues. So you can be a reviewed in the New York Times book review and everything. And in fact, I know guys who have done that and make almost no money on it. And so if you self-publish, you get to write the book you want to write, and you get a healthier percentage of your profits, and it's yours forever. So if my book sells a few $1,000 this year and a few thousand next year and a few thousand for the next 10 years, it's going to make a lot of money. And so the potential is there to make a ton of money, but I have to write more books, and we can get to that later. But it's American Oz. I can't recommend it enough. The reviews are spectacular. And if it doesn't win at least being shortlisted for a Pulitzer, it'll because I published it right around the time of, I was thinking about this last night. I published it right around the deadline time for the Pulitzers, and there was no hard copy. There was only paperback. And I think that's going to doom me, but it's going to win awards. It's already highly acclaimed, and what a read if I can help if I can sell it a little bit to your listeners, because
yeah, of course. So of all your experiences, this one obviously you wrote a book, but why wouldn't you? Who's crazy enough to go, I think I'm going to go to Ireland where they box all the time, and I'm going to win a boxing championship?
Yeah, everything has a story.
Is that because you're from Chicago? The only people from Chicago go and do something like that?
By the way, wearing this hat, when I was in Chicago, I worked in Chicago. They all go, "Oh my God, it's a freaking hayseed." But no, everything has an explanation. It doesn't seem as adventurous if you know the whole backstory. Although riding bicycle out 3 times across America that's weird, and hitchhiking around the Middle East and North Africa, that's weird. But boxing, that was my junior year of college. I went a junior year abroad, and I'm tall, so I was going to be a basketball player, but the basketball season got canceled. So I went, you know what, I'm going to stay fit. I'm going to go into boxing. And I boxed all year, and then came the city championship. And I won the heavyweight boxing championship of Cork, Ireland, which is the second biggest city in Ireland. If you're Irish Catholic, your family came from Cork Harbor to America. And so it's a harbor city. It's a tough little town, and I won by knockout, and it's a long, fun story. And I bring it up all the time. My dad says I'm the quiet man. I'm John Wayne and the quiet man. I went back to Ireland and won a boxing championship. All the things I've ever done in my life. I could have died at age 21 years old, and I would have been a success because of that in my family.
So I'm curious about your relationship with your daughter when you were apart and doing all these non-traditional parental activities that would seem like risky. And how are we now?
Well, I'm back in Barrington, which is outside of Chicago, and I'm living near her. And because I want to screw her up as badly as my parents screwed me up. No, I want to give her some fatherly advice, and I want to be around her and let her know she's loved, and so I want to be near her. But family separation is so heartbreaking on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And she felt it because I was going through a divorce at the time also.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was missing her dad. She was 7 years old. And I came to town. I saw her both in Chicago and in Minneapolis and at Thanksgiving. But amplify that by several times for the Mexicans.
Mm-hmm.
The Mexicans leave town in February. They leave Tlapacoyan. This is a little town in Veracruz state that empties out of men every year. It is almost a ghost town of men for 9 months to 10 months a year. And they all go north and they work in traveling carnivals. The mayor is the recruiter for carnivals. And he sends them up north and they are separated from their wives and their children and everything for 9 months. They never see them. And they do it year after year. And that is real heartbreak. And that I could relate to because again, I felt it. And so it's an ongoing theme that really tugs on the heartstrings because she really let me know that it hurt her that I wasn't around.
Yeah, she was a part of this in a way as well. What's the one question that nobody ever asked you that you wish they would?
Well, I wish they would. I can tell you one that I wish they wouldn't, and that was one of the reviews, which was it was a 1-star review, and she goes, that jerk left his daughter for a year, and I go, oh crap! I didn't for the whole year. That's not 100% true, but it's somewhat true. That's in, but well, not enough people ask about. Well, I can tell you as a writer that not a lot of people ask about how hard it was to write, because I'm rewriting history, real things, and I'm rewriting it, and that is difficult. But it was a joy. The living it was a joy also. It's fresh air. You're living outside. You work till you're tired, then you get up again, and so there was great joy. It was a lot of fun. The writing was hard, to rewriting, and the rejection after rejection. And I've also been asked, would you do it again? And I no, there's no reason for it. And but I did. I came back and I had a hard time finding any work, and because I was a carnival worker, and I mean, that's not going to help you do corporate relations and PR. And I'm not kidding. I interviewed with Allstate. The boss I was going to work with went to Northwestern with me. I have a master's degree from Northwestern. I have 5 degrees. And but I walked in and I was going to be corporate relations for Allstate, which is a 6-figure job. Mm-hmm. And I had to explain to him that I spent the last year running carnivals. I was in carnivals for the last year, and I didn't get the job, even though the boss wanted me. Mm-hmm. And but my mother went, "Oh no, oh no!" And I go, "What are you worried about?" And she goes, "You're going to go back to carnivals, aren't you?" You're going to work on the carnivals now. I know it. They're the only ones that are going to take you. And I go, holy crap! I'm going to try to make this book thing work. And by the way, another aspect here is that I was in my 50s. I'm now 61, and turning your life around at a later age, reinventing yourself, is it's not easy. And I think it's not easy as a kid because it's easier as a kid because you're inventing yourself constantly, and. But as you get older, then you're kind of used to a certain person that you've been for a long time, and now I'm having to learn algorithms and I'm having to learn how to self-publish with nobody looking over my shoulder. And every time I hit a glitch, I have to problem solve my way out of it. And I wish by now I knew what I was doing, but every day is a new challenge and a new thing to learn, which is both exciting and frustrating and daunting.
Michael, this has been a fascinating interview. Michael Sean Comerford. Um, his book is American Oz. You can get it on Amazon. Where else can you get it, Michael?
Oh, everywhere. I made sure that I'm covered wide. So you can get it on Nook, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, Apple. You can get it at your local store. Every discount books site, you can find it everywhere. And it is a quick read if that's what you love. It's as deep as you want it to be. If you want to read deeply, you're going to find some deep themes in here, and universal, eternal themes. And it's a book that you'll think about for a long time.
Wow. You can connect with Michael on LinkedIn. Where else can they find you, Michael?
Michael Sean Comerford, Comerford being Comerford, michaelseancomerford.com. And I'm also on YouTube on that. And I also have a blog, Guys Like Carnivals. And I look forward to being releasing more books out on climate change and things like that. But that's how the publishing business of mine is going to go forward.
All right. Michael, thanks for being on the ROI Online Podcast.
Thank you.
All right. And that's a wrap.